What is something that is expensive, but only owned by poor people? As somebody who works at a gas station, Newport cigarettes. Seriously. It's only ever poor people who buy them, and they're one of the most expensive cigarette brands we carry. As a former gas station cashier, I noticed a few trends. The poor folk who buy Newports are usually the poor trying to flex on other poors. The more humble poors go for things like Pall Malls and First Class. Whatever menthol is cheapest. Also, there is a very distinct racial divide, with almost all Newport buyers being POC or living with POC. The white poors always flex with Marlboros. I remember I had an old Chevy truck that cost so much to maintain and keep fuel in that I couldn't afford to save for another car. I literally kept me broke until I eventually joined the military and could afford a different vehicle. Crappy cars are more expensive than you realize. A perpetually broken car. I was leaving an abusive relationship that also ruined my credit. So my parents bought me a car so that I could survive once I got out. They overpaid and spent $3,000 on a 2002 Toyota Corolla with over 200,000 miles on it. It was nice gesture, but I'm now stuck paying them back every month, and I have spent over $1,500 in repairs on this car in the last year and it's still not running like it should. There's no way I could find another sucker to buy this piece of junk, so I'm stuck with it until I can pay it off or until I fix my credit. What a mess. Best advice I can give is to learn the car and how to work on it. Saves an absolute ton of money and the threshold for getting into it is a lot lower than most people think. I can throw advice your way if you want more. Lack of preventative care. Cheap shoes or a cheap mattress leads to more expensive medical care. Lack of dental maintenance leads to expensive surgeries. That kind of thing. When you can't afford preventative medical care, it catches up to you, leading to more expensive costs later. Bad credit. It is expensive to make someone comfortable enough to loan you money without them being certain you'll pay it back. A lot of companies like cell phone service providers will make you put down a large deposit before they'll sign a contract. Pretty much anything with a contract is more expensive if your credit is bad. I wasn't taught money skills growing up and was stupid as a teenager, so my credit has been a struggle to rebuild. Me and you both. I've raised my scores 150 points or so each in the last year though, so it's coming together. Rent to own. Spoiler, you never quite own it. I was going through a divorce in another state, and knew I was going to get my furniture at the end of the process. So I rented a cheap couch for like $10 for 2 to 3 months to put in my apartment until I got all my stuff. They tried to bully me into buying into all kinds of extra unneeded insurances. They were very forceful and condescending. Then one day, I honestly forgot to pay on the date payment was due. It was $10, and I easily had the money. So I was shocked at the level of anger and pushiness from the phone call reminding me payment was due. It made me feel very bad for the people who have to go through these situations and treatment in order to have furniture. Not to mention that the couch was complete junk. Payday loans. They should be illegal. They hurt people more than they help them. Edit, my first Reddit gold. Thank you, anonymous stranger. That's some people's only option though. If they have shit credit and the lights are getting turned off, that may be their only option. Once those are legal, loan sharks come back and you just get beat or killed if you can't pay it back. Interest rates are stupid high because it's high risk to lend to these people who don't have money in the first place, and they would go out of business if they charged reasonable rates. Usually quickly preparable food items. They're usually more expensive than if I stuffed a bell pepper with rice and a small amount of minced meat and shoved it with the oven with tomato sauce, for example. Simple recipes with low ingredient counts are normally very cheap and delicious. They do however take time to make, time some people might not have because they have to work in order to finance the time they spend sleeping. Edit, extra tip, processing vegetables yourself and vacuum sealing them in liquid stasis lets you store them for ages without having to freeze them, and they can be pulled out at any given time to still your hunger nutritiously. Edit 2, not quite sure but I think the English term for it is pickled. Someone in the comments also referred to it as standard canning process. The more you learn. Edit 3. Thanks to Poems for pointing this out and writing this definition. The standard canning process that was mentioned is the process of putting something in jars/cans/whatever that have been sterilized in boiling water, and filling them to the very brim before sealing them while they are still hot. This ensures there is no oxygen inside, and that it is sterile to last a long time. This process is often done with pickled things, but can also be done with hot sauces, pasta sauce, homemade barbecue sauce, anything liquid or stored in liquid. Hope this helps. Please note that boiling glass is a dangerous process and any temperature change has to be regulated and slow to prevent the glass from bursting into pieces. Also, not having usable kitchens, which financially stable people don't even think of as a thing. Bad teeth. When you can't afford a dentist visit and let your oral health slide, it can have all sorts of expensive health consequences, such as heart disease. This hits home for me. I've spent $7,000 to have my teeth fixed. And that's with the insurance I work to get. Loads of stuff. It's expensive being poor for a variety of reasons, including having to buy poorer quality goods and needing to replace them more often because of initial cost, not being able to bulk buy, predatory loans, and really anything that puts someone in a you have no other choice position. On top of that, there are things like cheap food being bad for your health and incurring expensive health bills later in life, continuing paying rent on something you'll never own, cheap cars that require maintenance more often. Being poor is expensive AF. I'm unsure if this is a thing anywhere else, but in the UK we had a chain of stores called Bright House. They typically only appeared in relatively poor towns. They sold electronics, TVs, games consoles etc., home appliances and furniture, but in installments as opposed to one lump sum at purchase. Overall, you would end up paying more for the product in the long run, than straight up buying it. Essentially it was targeting poorer people who couldn't necessarily buy a new fridge etc. up front but needed one. The company went bust a few weeks ago, likely because of the lockdown. Aside from the normal sympathy for the workers, most people are happy to see the back of the company. I remember reading somewhere that poor people have a lot of stuff that just gather dust, that collection of frogs, collection of elephants, and other remembrances. Savvier people buy things that work for something, maybe books, TVs, kitchen utensils, etc. And the savviest, the ones that end up getting ahead, buy things that make them money, like investment instruments, business opportunities, whatever small they are. I don't really agree on the food point. You can have a really healthy diet without spending too much if you learn how to cook a little bit. So the problem with this is the problem with lots of advice given to the poor. First, you have to assume they have access to fresh food, a place to store said fresh food, space and tools for cooking, and then they have to learn how to cook and even learn how to shop in a completely different way than they may ever have. One of the things people take for granted is just the normal stuff you learn at home growing up by just watching your own parents. There are a lot of practical and psychological reasons the poor don't just poverty festers for a reason. What seems simple and normal to one person may be completely foreign to another, and a lot of times it's just about not even knowing what you don't know. One of the reasons things like the Harlem Youth Project are so successful is because it focuses so much on education. How to raise an infant, how to parent and discipline, how to bond, how to cook, how to budget, how to shop and save, etc. When you give people the tools and opportunity to make good choices, they often will, and then that cycle is broken. And to clarify, being poor doesn't mean one doesn't know how to do any of the above-mentioned things, but it's something we can't and shouldn't assume. Really poor people aren't wealthy enough for that. The most they can do for cooking might be warming things up by putting them next to the heater, or making instant stuff by adding hot water from a coffee maker. You need a home, a kitchen, or at least a fire and fuel, cookware, refrigerator, freezer, storage space for dry bulk items, and some way to get out of the food desert to a grocery store and haul stuff home. Some of that you can do pretty cheaply, surplus mess kit, but a lot of it isn't. This guy was mentioning owning a car. I was replying to him in the context of the wealth bracket he was referring to. Brown rice, oats, frozen vegetables, potatoes, beans. Those types of food are good options when you're in the dirt. Also, if you're that broke, you can always go dumpster diving. Grocery chains throws mind-boggling amounts of fresh produce every day. Most people that are browsing this thread probably have a phone. I don't think that beans, rice and frozen vegetables are out of reach for most. The amount of privates in the Army who have just enough money to pay for their 30% interest 2018 Ford Mustangs, but not enough money to buy literally anything else is pretty ridiculous. Edit, there to their edit too. Thanks for the ignite, kind stranger. Funny to me that my highest rated comment is about how stupid privates can be. While not in the military, I worked on a lot of military bases. You can always tell when you are getting close to the main gate. It's usually a combination of strip clubs, pawn shops, bars, and tattoo shops, but varies due to local law. But inevitably, there is always, without exception, a Ford dealer with a row of loaded Mustangs and F-150s out in front. Chrysler 300. You just brought back the funniest memory. My husband and I were looking at used cars. The hungry young car salesman told us he had something really special in the back. Walks us out there and shows us a Chrysler 300 that the former owner had bought huge, chrome 22 wheels for. It's every homie's dream. Except my husband is the gingery whitest, dad type ever and definitely not interested in this car. The kid put the cherry on the experience when he, straight face, said to my husband, "Can't you see yourself rolling on dubs?" My husband looked at me, totally lost and trusting me for translation. I was helplessly giggling at how badly the salesman had misread us and we left. Now every time we see a car with big wheels I ask him if he'd like to roll on dubs. Dead. I feel like the question was written just for this answer. The old post with your alt, respond with you main? I swear Reddit is only actually 25 people. Everyone on Reddit is a bot except for you.